All right, we are live. So, like yesterday, I'm going to just let this go for a little bit so people can join. But the gist of this is going to be that I'm going to sculpt this fellow right here. So this is taking this a little bit further from yesterday. I've taken this a little bit further offline just to be sure that some of the design things were solved a little bit more. Some of those things pretty hard to do while talking, so I prefer to do general design while I can really think just offline, and then I can do like almost laborious tasks of just like sculpting, that kind of stuff I can kind of do in autopilot, so I can take your questions and all that good stuff. So this is going to be a really fun one. We if you're coming here not from the present but from, I suppose, the future, if you're watching this as a just once the stream is over, just know that we have tons of other streams as well. So, you know, if you just want to watch this while working, while you're sculpting your own thing, feel free to do that. It's a nice little chill thing to do. We're just going to be talking about sculpting. Well, I'm going to be talking about sculpting. I am alone today. So yeah, we're just going to have a good time just sculpting up this little fawn guy and just making something that hopefully looks quite good. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what I'll use this character for. We're just kind of focusing on making more cool stuff now for Normals. Just trying to make some more cool characters, because this kind of stuff always sparks something. Maybe this turns into a full character course in the end, where of course then I'll have to remake the whole character. But let's see about that. I'm generally not sure. So, but I've recorded the whole progress so far as well. So today I'm going to just spend a bit more time on, well, the whole thing really. I'm probably going to be doing a bit more work on the horns as well, which is just going to take some time. There's no secret here. You just spend time sculpting. Somebody's asking, is this allowing you pre-recorded? Well, this is all live, so you can ask your questions and all that good stuff. So yeah, just join me for a little sculpting journey. Yeah, like with the other ones, just feel free to ask your questions as well. I'm going to be monitoring the chat throughout. I mightn't get to your questions right away because I might be sculpting. I can only have so many thoughts in my head at the same time. But it's going to be a fun one. Yeah, this is all based on Pan's Labyrinth as well. So this is, I believe, a sculpture from it, like a toy sculpture or something. So the real one is going to be something like this, but don't think I'll do a full one-to-one because I don't really enjoy that. So I'm probably going to do something a little bit less accurate, a little bit less, a bit of my own flair to it. I think it's really important to honestly just embrace manual labor, embrace the fact that certain things are just going to take time. Here I'm going to work up the horns, and this may just take some time, right? Is there a free version of ZBrush? There is a free version of ZBrush. It's called ZBrush Core. It's not very feature rich, but it's a good intro to it. There are tons of stuff you can do in it already, and honestly, a lot of stuff you don't. To do a lot of stuff, you don't really need a lot of crazy features. Like what we're doing now, I'm basically using a single brush. I'll just move this here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm using just a damn standard for this, and I'll be using a custom brush as well. It looks like this, but you can just use the clay buildup for that instead. Totally fine. What is the name of the character in a reference? I'm not sure if he has a name. It's just the fawn from Pan's Labyrinth. I don't actually think he has a name. I think he is just fawn. So yeah, just search for that. A really, really, really cool movie. Really brutal. It's like a fairy tale for adults. One of my absolute favorite movies. I've seen it like 10 times. We want to do the fawn for a very long time, but it's been one of those. I haven't felt that I've been up to the task in terms of doing it justice, but it's also kind of silly because I worked in movies, so hopefully I should be good enough to do these kind of characters. But it is what it is. Sometimes you put on stupid restrictions on yourself. It's a tricky one to sculpt because the design is a bit wacky. It works really well in the film, but it's a little bit of a hard design to actually translate. Also, there isn't too much reference for it. The movie is quite old at this point, so yeah, it's a bit hard to find good ref. Are you using Blender or some other software? This is ZBrush or ZBrush, so just Z and then brush. So just sculpting this up. Not sexy work, but it's important to just spend time with this stuff. And it's currently 29 degrees Celsius in my apartment because we have a heat wave in London and this country hasn't invented AC yet. So I am absolutely boiling. So apologies if I suddenly have a heat stroke or something like that. If I do, I'm probably just going quiet. So there is that. I mean, what other programs are you using besides ZBrush? I'm using all sorts of stuff. I'm using Blender and Maya as the main 3D software. And then I'm using Painter and Mari for texturing. And sometimes Topogun for retopo, but usually I just do my topo directly in Maya instead. Just because it's a bit more available. Like Topogun is not a particularly expensive software, but you'd have to switch software. Just a bit annoying. Also, in terms of dealing with things like extrusions or something like that, you don't really have like proper modeling tools. You have really good topology tools, but you don't really have like poly modeling tools, which is something you need just quite often. But honestly, it doesn't matter too much what you're using. They're all pushing polygons, right? So 3D has got so good today that the tools are way less important than the person doing it. Is your favorite part of the character pipeline retopology? But for me, it feels the least creative. Yeah, I don't. Retopology for me is like fine. I don't really like it or dislike it. It's fine. It can be kind of nice to do sometimes, I suppose, because you get to just kind of shut off your brain to some degree. But it's not like it's super rewarding, right? Like if topology just disappeared, that would also be okay. But yeah, you just export out the models as OBJs and throw them into Topogun or Maya or Blender or anything like that. And then you just retopologize them there. You don't really want to use zero meshing or anything like that for like auto retopology for characters like this. Because then you get into a world of pain because it's just not going to work, to be honest. It's just not going to be very nice. So for retopology, I can also answer questions about topology. Any questions you guys have, to be honest, just go for it. But topology, you really want to, for characters, really want to just do that stuff by hand, unless it's very work in progress topology. Like it might be fine at this point to like just do a quick zero meshing pass on him and then just sculpt it up. That might be fine, but you really want to be sure that for the final thing you have proper topo. I found it hard to retopologize hands and the tips. Honestly, don't retopologize hands. It sucks to do. It's just one of those things that is inherently just a bit hard to do. Same with ears as well. Every time I have to do hands, it's a bit like what I'm actually dealing with right now. I just kind of steal it from a base mesh. In this case, I think I will have to retop. I wouldn't have to, but I think I want to retopologize it, just so it all fits together. But I don't really mess around with hands. It's not even that it's that hard in like an absolute sense. It just takes a lot of time. It's annoying to do hands. It's annoying to do ears. And honestly, most hands are kind of the same anyway. So if you've done one, you can kind of just use that in the future. That's what I think, at least. It's better to spend time on the parts that really require a human touch, like doing proper bespoke sculpting, bespoke texturing, instead of spending time on something that really is fairly standardized. But I do recommend in general, like if you are having issues with hands and you have to do hands, obviously if you have to do hands, like it's for a portfolio piece and you can't just steal it from somewhere else, and I'm just saying, yeah, don't do it. That doesn't help you, right? If you need to do it, Find reference. Honestly, just find reference for hands, how other people have solved it. You don't just use reference for sculpting, you use reference for everything. So if you are dealing with hands or anything like that and topology and you're having a hard time, just figure out how other people have solved it. There's no shame in that whatsoever. So I'm just working a little bit all over the place now in terms of the model. Just trying to make sure it looks nice. I like your brush, and where I can find it, not yet. I haven't shared this yet with anyone. It's a really nice brush. It's one of those I might turn into a brush pack, but I might also just release it for free. In that case, it would just be a free product on Flipmodels, but currently it's not available anywhere. But yeah, you'll probably know if that changes because we will announce it on our social media, but no news on that yet. Honestly, it's just the clay billet brush with a custom alpha, so nothing too fancy, though it is a quite nice one. I have replaced my clay billet brush, which might sound like blasphemy because that is the best brush ever made, but I think I might have been able to improve it. At least that's what I find. I really like this custom brush. I just really want to be sure that it's something that is genuinely really good before we start to release it as well. As a VFX artist, have you ever done programming, like creating rendering software, useful tools for animation? Nope. It's at least in VFX, like an actual in high-end production, you guess you can do programming if you really want to. I work with some people who are really good at scripting, so they would like make some Python scripts, some Mel scripts and that kind of stuff. Some people I have, or one guy I work with specifically, he was also a programmer, so he was able to make that kind of stuff, but you're just not going to do that. It's such a different field from what we're doing, from what we're working on in terms of art. So you're really not gonna ever do any programming unless you very specifically are interested in that. Yeah, can you please explain to me the techniques of sculpting without using a smooth brush? I saw one of your reels. Yeah, that's a reel we got out last week. Let me actually explain this. This is actually kind of an interesting one. So I'm going to make a polymesh 3D, and then we're just going to be sculpting on this. So what we're doing is, first you need to find kind of what you want to sculpt. So if I want to just have something kind of going out here, like something like this, then I'm just going to basically do this for it. Just try to get in some volume for it. And then I'm going to start sculpting across the forms. So this is something that I do for all my sculpts. So it doesn't really matter which brush I'm using for this. This is just a general shape. So if I want to just have something up, I can either do this just to get some volumes, or I can just do sideways, right? It doesn't really matter. And if I have a shape on the other side here, we can just do this, and then we get kind of like some peaks and valleys. Then what I'm doing with this is that I'm kind of just sculpting across the shapes. So I'm kind of just sculpting like this. And this just provides a very natural feel. I'm using a very low pen pressure for this, like actually like a light pressure with my hand. So to show this is a hard pressure, this is a low pressure, and the only thing that's different now is just the pressure of my hand, which is cool because it means you can vary this from the beginning of the stroke to the end of the stroke. This is something that just takes time to do. So I can go very light, and then I can go in here, change the brush size a little bit, can go in and I can make some new shapes into this, and I can just kind of blend it in one stroke. This is how I'm sculpting. This is how I'm teaching sculpting as well, in terms of in all the courses, mentorships and all that. So this is a really powerful way of working. And this is the gist of it. You work across the shape, and you use a semi-low pressure, like a mid-level pressure, in order to see intensity, and then you adjust it a lot with your actual hand, and you can get really lovely results this way. Then you can also smooth stuff out. I'm not opposed to smoothing things. You just have to be aware that smoothing isn't really smoothing. Like a lot of people assume that smoothing is kind of like a relaxing feature. Smoothing is blurring. So the smooth brush you have in ZBrush is just like the blur tool in Photoshop. It just blurs what you have, which means that it doesn't take anything into account. It's not an intelligent tool, which isn't even a good or a bad thing. It is just what it is. So if you assume that, if that's your assumption that it's just a blur brush, well then sometimes you have to blur things, right? And so that means that if you don't want to make these shapes cleaner, then what you can do, instead of just going like basically sculpting across the whole thing like this, what I do is I separate these shapes out into parts, and then I go across it like so, just in circles. So we just go over each volume like so, and then we just work over it like so in circles. So there are tons of ways to sculpt, of course. Some people just sculpt smooth. Totally valid. My preferred way is to do this. So the reason you also do want to smooth a little bit, you can also reduce the intensity of the smooth brush by holding on the shift key, is you want to remove the brush strokes. The brush strokes, they do look very nice, don't they? But the problem is that they're noise. So you want to be sure to eliminate noise. By noise, I mean that they obscure the main surface. So if you have too many brush strokes on your model, it looks better than it's supposed to. And this is where short term, great, right? It looks better. But long term, you get into trouble because you don't really fully understand what the surface looks like. You don't fully control it. And also once you take it into a rendering software, then like, you know, Cycles, Arnold, RenderMan, whatever you want to, then you get into trouble, because then you're going to start to see a lot of the issues, particularly if you're further away. But yeah, this is my approach. And then you can go in here with a damp standard and just start to like add some little creases here. You don't have to go over the whole thing. You can just kind of add them a little bit all over the place. And then you can start to add more volumes around these ones. So then you could smooth and sculpt. That's also a perfectly valid approach. And you can see you get a pretty natural looking feeling from this. This is how I'm sculpting absolutely everything. So yeah, that's my approach for that. That's how I'm doing with this as well. Yeah, what alpha I'm using for this, it's just a custom one. So you know, you won't have access to this one, but normally the way I'm using just alpha 06, which is this one right here. So clay buildup and alpha 06. That's the one I've been using for the longest time. So it's a really good one. It gets the job done very effectively. I just made my own one, which has a bit more texture to it, but it also allows me to be a bit more iterative. So instead of it just going in or out, it goes a little bit less in and out, if that makes sense. Do you retopologize each subtool after you export? Yeah. So in this case, I have the head and the body as one subtool, as separate subtools like this. This is just purely for ease of use, because it means that I can work on them independently. Not even that I can isolate them, but the poly count is independent as well, because this would be ridiculously heavy if this was combined now. And the head is more refined for the head model is a lot more refined in terms of design than the body. So I'm experimenting a lot more with the body. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff for retopology. I'm gonna merge that. Maybe during one of my future streams, I'm gonna show retopology for that as well. Not entirely sure, to be honest. And just as a reminder that we have a real nice summer sale ongoing at the moment, so just head over to flipmodels.com. I'm going to send all these links in here. So yeah, we just have a lot of really good offers. So all our own products, like the Flipmodels exclusives, are 40% off, and this includes like the face kit here, which is really, really solid for making pores and wrinkles. I use this all the time. I might actually use this later on in this character for this kind of stuff. So I'll send a link to this. I really do recommend this one here. This is really good for alphas. Then we have the eye kit, instant cool eyes. I'm probably going to be using this for this character as well. You just kind of drag and drop it into Blender or Maya or any other software. It's also from Marmoset, and you can just throw that right in there, and this is awesome. And intro to sculpting, I really do recommend this one. I keep getting questions all the time about like how should you, like we had this on stream yesterday as well, like how should you learn sculpting? I think the best thing is intro to sculpting. Like I made this course, I'm pretty biased here, but I really tried to put in all the lessons from the from like previous streams and talking to students and such into one course. So I really recommend these courses and these products I just mentioned now. And if you guys are interested in other products as well, just let me know what you want to learn, and I'll see if I have something up my sleeve. But yeah, just continuing with the sculpt for now, just trying to go in and making sure this is nice. One of my top tips for making nice textures actually is to make a nice sculpt. This sounds maybe a little bit silly, but if you're trying to texture something like these horns here, and it looks kind of like the back here, you're going to have to do all sorts of dirty hacks for it. It's just never going to really look right, because it's just not there. Like the model just isn't there. But if you have sculpted this to a really high level, then texturing this isn't that difficult. You can get away with like a lot of ways. You can get away with softer gradients. So just going through with softer gradients and just trying to make the tips brighter, the tips darker, the crevices brighter or darker, like in terms of the roughness map, the color map and all that. So if you have a really strong sculpt, texturing becomes so much easier. If texturing is easier and looks nicer, shading and looked at is going to be much nicer. If the shading is nice, then doing the render is going to be nicer. It's just going to look much nicer. Do you still use DAS as a base mesh tool? Yeah, sometimes. It's a really good tool for that, because you can pose stuff. So it means that you can pose stuff, you can play around with ZBrush, you can go back and forth, but I don't use it that much. Also because our characters like this you can't, because it's too unique, because here, you know, it has a whole different setup for it. So it wouldn't work for something like this. I'm sure some people can make it work, but this is fundamentally more of a creative sculpt. This here started from a sphere, right? So for this, it was more like a sculpting challenge. But yeah, DAS can be good. Concept art is really cool, because you can just kind of, like, you have like such a large wardrobe of stuff. Like you can just play around with a lot of the premium models. So someone is asking here about, do you have any course showing various ways of bringing references into ZBrush and work from, say, 3D character turn sheet, like if you want to, or making a sculpt for a popular IP. So one thing here, this is one course that came out not too long ago. This is a masterclass I made. It's like 20 something hours long, and it covers really all you need to, let's see if it's even here. It covers really the whole progress, start to finish. It's this character here, just as a full course. So this one does show all that. Like we bring image planes into ZBrush and working from that, and really like focusing on keeping the design proper. So I do really recommend that masterclass. Here it is, this one right here. So I'll send a link to this one. So this here is the masterclass. Like this whole thing is shown in real time. Like there are no time lapses or anything. I will show absolutely everything here, from sculpting, retopology, UVs, setting up the shaders in Blender, painting everything in Painter, setting up the final render. So all this kind of stuff is shown here. So we do start with lining things up as well. So you see it's kind of like, this is after like a very short amount of time, and then we just kind of stays on target because we are lining things up with reference. So yeah, I do really recommend this course. Hey, nice star rating. Always fun to watch that. Hey, what is the best way to learn how to sculpt very good anatomy? Well, I don't want to be like a one-trick pony here, but I made a course last year for this where I basically answered this fairly in depth because, man, it's difficult to learn anatomy. It just genuinely just is really, really hard because it's so technical. So it's both technical and artistic, meaning that there is a lot of very specific things you have to know. So here is the Intro to Anatomy course. So when it comes to learning anatomy, I can just talk about this one, sculpting. Learning anatomy is really, really difficult. So you have to learn the names of a lot of things. There's just a lot of vocab you have to learn. If you don't learn what the vocab is like it's like learning a language, right, to some degree. If you don't know what the pectoralis major is, you're just going to have a harder time learning to sculpt. But it's not just enough to learn the names of them. You have to learn the function of the muscles. You have to learn what they look like, and you have to learn how they all interconnect. So it's really difficult. That's what we did with Intro to Sculpting. We tried to make it accessible. So many courses, I've taken a lot of anatomy courses, right? That's how I learned anatomy. So many courses and books, they just focus on, all right, starting with this muscle here, going through it, next one, next muscle, next muscle, next muscle. And I don't think that is a particularly good way to learn because it's just too overwhelming, in my opinion. There is just way too much stuff to learn, but also because fundamentally you don't really learn how it all connects. So for instance, pure like anatomy lesson here, the issue a lot of people do when we're talking about anatomy, right, is that they're focusing on, all right, so now we have the bicep brachii going from the coracoid, whatever, and it goes into the radius, right? And it has like the tendon here, and it has the two heads, and it goes out. And you're like, all right, cool. Then we have the tricep. It has 3 heads, right? And it goes into this, and it goes into, and it's just so technical. Instead, what I think is a much better way, which is how we're teaching it, is what if you had a string from down here and a string from up here? What happens if this string gets shorter? It's locked up here. Well, the arm would go from here to up here, right? This is a more fundamental way of thinking about anatomy. So instead of just memorizing absolutely everything, it's much more important to understand kind of the function of it, and then being like, all right, cool. So we have the string from here to here. That means we can get the arm up. What if you want to do the opposite? What if you want to pull the arm down? Well, let's do a string from like here to here. And let's make this string get shorter. And then boom, we have the bicep, we have the tricep. And now you just kind of understand stuff in a much more intuitive manner. So this is how I like to teach. And you do have to study a lot, but I really put down everything I know about anatomy basically in Intro to Anatomy. It's both like quite giving a good overview of how things work, but also going into specific muscles. Another way to do it is to just buy an anatomy book and just start to sculpt from there. Like that stuff sucks. It's really, really difficult. So they also have some other courses as well. Like Scott Eaton has a full course on anatomy. That one is quite expensive. It's good, but it's very, very hardcore as well. So, and not necessarily in a good way. It is a good course. I took this like way, way back, but it's not practical, right? It just goes through all the muscles, and it's just information overload. So I think it's very important to focus on practical anatomy when it comes to sculpting. Because frankly, you're not a doctor. We're not saving lives. If your anatomy is correct or not, it actually doesn't really matter in the sense that you're not building a robot. Or if if a doctor's anatomy knowledge is incorrect, he is going to he's going to do something with the heart instead of lungs, right? If we were to confuse the bicep and a tricep, right, and mention that to the person in the wrong way, worst case, the character looks goofy, right? So it's not that it really, really matters to have correct anatomy, because we're not doing anything medical. So if you're a physiotherapist, it's very important, because then you come in with knee pain and you have to relax your IT band. That stuff becomes very important. But if you're a character artist, you don't really know what the IT band is, you're still kind of fine. So I think anatomy needs to be taught in a practical manner. And then you go like more in depth as you go. If you start off learning anatomy with terms like this is the bicep brachii, and here's the rectus femoris and vastus lateralis and extensor carpi radialis, like all this kind of stuff, you're just going to, it's not like you're going to get a great education at it. You're just going to go, well, that was a lot, and then you're just not going to continue with it, I think. At least most people would be like that. And even if you do know all the fancy terms, it doesn't mean you know how to use them, right? So it's much, much, much more important to understand the main function of things instead of, and how you simplify stuff instead of knowing the absolute exact medical definition of different things. I think that's just really important. What is the recurring training to enhance and improve the use of tools primarily in all programs? You just gotta work it. You just gotta use it a lot. Just like, it sounds like a simple one, but just use the tools. Just I don't think you should be just doing exercises for staying up to date on Blender, Painter, Maya, ZBrush, and all that, because that can just get a bit excessive. What I think is a good idea is just do projects, and then you're learning as you're doing. What a good way is to find specific goals instead of just looking at the documentation and reading all that. Though we can talk about that later. A better idea is to go, all right, I want to make this specific thing, and then you focus on making that specific thing. The advantage of that method is that you get to really test what you want, and you get to only learn what's applicable at that point, meaning everything you learn is directly useful to you at this time. It's not the case that you're just gathering all this insane theoretical knowledge. That said, reading the docs is pretty handy as well. I do this from time to time. Like whenever I'm learning a new software, I read the docs, and it speeds up learning so much. But also if there's a new version out of a software, I also try to read the docs. Just straight up like hit F1 in the software and read the documentation there, or like all software will have that online as well. It's such a benefit, because then you can just straight up just see exactly how all functions work. The amount of tips and tricks and such I've collected just because I read the documentation is insane. Because otherwise you're basically relying on somebody else interpreting things for you, and when somebody interprets something, they're going to probably screw some stuff up here and there and omit some things that might be important. So then you just go straight to the source. Will you texture this character on a live stream? Maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't decided yet what I'm even using this character for. So far, this character here is just for me to have fun with him and to do, the stream and to show some cool stuff. But I'm tempted to take this guy all the way, and then I might as well texture him on a live stream. Texturing for this guy here really is a large way making sure the sculpting is realistic. If the sculpting is not good for this, then it doesn't matter what I try to texture. Like, it doesn't matter if the color map is brilliant if the model isn't working. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time just really refining the model. Like, that is one of the key lessons you can learn as a sculptor or as a texture artist as well. Like, the sculpting and texturing are so intertwined. Particularly for characters. It's a bit different for hard surface, of course, but for characters, it's really hard to even say where one begins and one ends. One example of this would be like, alright, certain things can be put into a displacement normal map. So is that, like, if you're doing your stuff in Paint or Mari, right? But so is that texturing? Well, it goes into a map, right? But it's basically emulating shape changes. So it's emulating sculpting. But what if you were to do this so it's texturing, right? So it's because it goes on a map. But what if you were to do the exact same thing in ZBrush using sculpting instead of doing it in Painter? Well, is it now sculpting or texturing? Like, it doesn't really matter. It's almost just becomes an intellectual discussion. But at the end of the day, you really just have to be sure that the shape of it is working. If that is through sculpting absolutely everything and putting everything into a displacement map, or doing a lot of stuff in Painter or Mari and putting that into a disp or normal map, doesn't really matter. The important thing is just that you really focus on good, high quality maps to alter the actual shape, which are independent of the color. At the core, even a roughness map is kind of a shape map, because really that's doing micro facets. If from a purely like practical point of view, like, it's not like you just change the actual how shiny something is, but really it would be something that you would be doing with displacement if we had unlimited resources, which we do not. Are you using a graphic tablet for sculpting? Yes, sir. You definitely don't want to be using a mouse for sculpting. And every single time I say that, somebody's like, oh, but I have a cousin who's doing that and it's great. Yeah, your cousin is going to have RSI and they're not going to be able to produce art pretty soon. Like, you need a tablet for sculpting. If you're doing any sculpting seriously, it's not even like a debate. You just need a tablet, like purely for like ergonomical reasons, but also just technical ones that, you know, you have pressure. You don't have pressure with a mouse, so it's just so much faster to sculpt with a pen. It takes a bit of practice as well, of course, because, you know, you actually legit have to learn how to use it. It's a whole new skill, but it's just spend time learning it. It's one of those things that it's not even like, oh, it's worth it or not. Like it's just something you have to do. If you want to be a character artist, if you want to do a lot of sculpting, you need to basically use ZBrush. If you want to retopologize, you just have to learn how to retopologize. It's the same thing with this. You just have to learn how to sculpt with a tablet. Assuming that you are serious about it. If you just doodle around once in a while, I mean, who cares? But if you actually want to do characters more seriously, yeah, 100% you need a tablet. Eric is saying, I'm going through the masterclass right now. I'm having a fantastic time. Thanks for such a great course. The one issue I'm having is how ZBrush export displacement to Blender. The tag is wrong. Solved by going in manually, but that becomes a pain when entering non-linear parts of the workflow. Just be sure, assuming that's a UDIM tag. So there are two issues that could be happening. One is if you're going under multimap exporter, you just have to be sure that the name here is set to UDIM. Just be sure this is set to UDIM. If this is set to UDIM and it doesn't work, oh crap, I just killed my purif. If this is set to UDIM and it's still wrong, that means your UVs themselves are wrong. That means that you most likely have UVs outside of the border of a UDIM. So I really recommend just double checking that, because this should work 100% of the time. And if the issue is in Blender, that the tag doesn't appear, well, that's just a Blender issue, and there's not a crazy amount you can do about that. It sounds like a software bug then. Yeah, so sculpting a bit on this character off stream, simply like I mentioned, is right when I start now. But simply because it's really difficult for me to design things while talking. I can sculpt a lot of things, but designing things is a bit of a different thing. Designing things is like solving a puzzle. It's very difficult to talk to somebody if you're solving an actual puzzle, unless it's like something you've been doing a million times. But if you're So for that, I'm just doing that in my own time. But this kind of stuff is kind of labor. Doing this kind of stuff, like general sculpting, is something I can do like with a brain shot now, because I've been doing this such a long time. But for designing, and in this case, it wasn't even like massive character design changes. It was just gesture and refinement. That stuff I need just to do on my own. But looking at something here and just kind of sculpting it, that stuff is alright. ZBrush newbie here. Can you unwrap a model in ZBrush? What is the workflow for after the Dynamesh model is done? Alright, cool. Let's draw. So, what you do is, once this guy here is done, then you, first off, you retopo him. So, straight up retopo. The reason we do retopology is that basically what it looks like is going to look like this. It's going to have nice big squares, and this is going to just look really nice. And the reason for this is so that, few reasons. You can, if you're in a production, you need this because so that he can be animated. Because this guy here is like a few million polys at this point, you cannot animate or rig this. So you need like a low-res model for this, so it can be animated, it can be posed and rigged, and just generally having better performance in the scene. Then once retopology is done, then you do UVs. UVs is, you know how you have like carpets and some like old-timey cabins where it's like a deer or something, and if the deer has been turned into a carpet, that's UV mapping. Basically, you're taking a three-dimensional object and you turn it into a two-dimensional object. You unwrap the object. And when you say unwrapping, it's a very real thing. You literally unwrap it. You take it from a 3D shape like so as a cylinder, and then you just turn it into something flat like so. So that UVs. And once you're done with that, then you take your iris, which is this what we currently have, and you project. So you project the iris onto the new topology. You have to subdivide this, and that means that you now have a model that has a real nice low-res base, but you can subdivide this up and down. Like you see here, you would have subdivisions. So you can go up and down in subdivisions, and then you can export this to texturing. So this can be in Painter, or this can be done in Mari. You start texturing, and you can decimate this model, meaning you drastically reduce the poly count while preserving the shapes. You can decimate this, put this into Painter or Blender, Painter or Mari. And then once you're done with this, you put this into something like, I'm going to move down here, terrible use of space. Now you put this into something like shading, or you do shading on it. So this is where you're setting up materials for it. And this can be done in basically any render engine of choice. This can be done in Cycles for Blender. It can be done in Maya, Cinema 4D, really anything. They're all very similar today. And then you do lighting, and then you do rendering, and then you do the step that nobody ever does, which is comp. Then you do color. In comp, you do color grading, and you make sure that it looks nice. So comp is super important. You can do this in Photoshop. You can also do this in something like DaVinci. So yeah, like just that is the overall process for this. Reese is saying, thanks for everything. I'm closer to my goals now than ever. And it's thanks to you, Henning, Morten, and Flip Normals. Thank you so much. That's really, really cool to hear. It's generally really cool when I'm hearing that what we're doing makes a difference. Generally, that means a lot to me. Thank you so much. How much RAM is good for ZBrush? Is 32 enough? Yep. I currently have 16, so it's fine. 32 is plenty, unless you're like doing absolutely insane stuff. Like, I don't have any issues with 16 gigs, to be honest, in ZBrush. To put it like this, I started with ZBrush way back, and I ran ZBrush on a computer which I got in high school, which was, I think, the computer I got it in 2007. It was definitely a few years old, so let's assume it was probably a mid-tier laptop from 2004. It ran ZBrush fine. So ZBrush runs on absolute garbage. So you can throw anything. You can throw ZBrush. It's almost like Doom, right? You can run it on a fridge. You can probably run ZBrush on a fridge. The only restriction would, of course, be the poly counts you can have. But even then, you can probably have like 100 million polys on a fridge. ZBrush is ridiculous when it comes to poly counts. Yeah, Lars is saying here, if you're presenting in something like Unreal, you can also do comping directly in Engine. Yeah, same as if you're doing in Blender as well, you can also do that. I always prefer to do stuff in something like Fusion or Nuke, but Photoshop. But that's also because I don't really do real time. If you are doing real time, it might be a good idea to stick to something like just straight up Unreal. Yeah, ZBrush runs on everything that's not Linux based. Yeah, no ZBrush on Linux, unfortunately. Do you texture in Ace as color space? Nope. I probably should, but currently it's a little annoying to work with. There is a lack of somehow good documentation for it, but also like it can just be a bit annoying to work with. For instance, I like to a lot of stuff I render in Blender, and Blender kind of sucks for Aces. Like, it's doable in Aces, but it's not great. Like, if you like, now they introduce like Filmic, right, which isn't Aces, right? That's a whole different thing. But it's just a lot of setup for it. So it's not, for particularly in Blender right now, it's really not fantastic. Maya is set up for Aces, so that's great. But yeah, it's just a lot of setup. I need my stuff to kind of work with like in a more agnostic manner. And the moment you make stuff for Aces, then it's basically it's aces, right? It's full aces. But I we'll probably see tools for that kind of stuff in the future be more built into tools, like Blender and such. It's not even like Blender for me is fine. I do like to use it for rendering because it's really fast, particularly GPU. I just got a new GPU last week, the 4080 Super, and it's an absolute beast. But I personally prefer to use Arnold for things. I think the result is nicer. It's a bit more stable. GPU rendering still a little bit crappy, but it's fine. But it just has better tools like XGen, which is not something I thought I would say that that's a better tool, because XGen is the biggest crap ever made. But it's a lot better than what you have in Blender for hair. Basically, what you have in Blender for hair is a very, very immature system for hair, which is kind of stable. Well, XGen is a very mature system that's very unstable. So it's like pick your poison, basically. But it means if you're patient enough with XGen and you kind of know how it works, then you can do some really, really cool stuff. But I also find the skin shading to be nicer in Arnold as well. I generally find Arnold to be a much better tool than Cycles, but Cycles is, if you're doing like more mid-tier stuff, Cycles is really good. But I want to do I like to do more high-end characters, and for that I definitely prefer Arnold for that. How do you pose your characters? The way I prefer to do it is I prefer to do, go through all the aforementioned steps, where you really, go through all the different things there, like the topology and all that. And then I like to do an auto rig for it. In Maya, you have something called Advanced Skeleton, which is fine. It's an auto rigging system that's free to use, and you can just use that to really just create a rig. Then you can post it, and it's so much nicer to post stuff with a rig compared to other posting tools. You do also, you can also post it with C-spheres in ZBrush and such, which is quite nice. The issue is just that if it's very destructive. So if you want to keep going back to the pose, keep refining it, like having a rig is brilliant. You can also use tools like Mixamo for that. Mixamo is really interesting. It's basically an auto rigger. I think it's owned by Adobe now. You just upload your model there, and then it auto rigs, and then does tons of crazy poses. The reason I prefer to rig my characters instead of just kind of hacking it together using Transpose Master here is that it's way more non-destructive, but also is volume preserving. So if you are rotating the arm around or something, it's not going to, like, you really have to preserve volumes yourself in ZBrush. It's kind of crappy like that. So I do really prefer to rig it. Like, I know Lars here from the chat is currently working on a project, a really cool one on, which is where he's like rigging his character. So, Lars, if you want to just shoot a link to that to Twitter, you can put that in there. Some nice jiggly bellies and butts. So that can look quite nice. So just feel free to shoot a link to that, because it's just nice to, even if you have no interest in becoming a rigger or something, just doing the basics of that is really handy. Just understanding kind of how it works, super useful stuff. But also just because it means you can just get a better pose from it, most likely. But what you can also do, if you want to pose your characters, you message a rigger being like, hey buddy, I have a character. Do you want to rig it? And you can also talk to an animator if they want to pose it for you. You can do a bit of a collaborative project with that. Because it can be hard for riggers to find good models. It can be hard for animators to find good rigs. So usually people are quite happy to work with that. But yeah, assuming that you're polite when you ask them, and assuming that it's an interesting enough project. So here the character is now symmetrical, but I will change that later. I'm probably not going to change the thing where it's like I'm probably not going to remove things from it. I'm just going to be adding things to one side. Is the retopology in ZBrush good for animation? It is not good for animation. The issue with the retopo in ZBrush is just that you don't really control it. So if you want, also retopo doesn't actually take that much time. So you don't want to save like a few hours just because it's done right away, because those hours are going to come back to haunt you like 100%. Like there is just no way it's not gonna, just because it's really, really difficult to do good automatic topology. So just spend that extra time on it, particularly if you're dealing with anything for portfolio. If you're dealing with anything for portfolio, just do that stuff by hand. Do not try to shave off some hours. Studios need to see that you can do that stuff. So also, it's just nicer to work with. It's just, I mean, to be fair though, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, but I'm working on a Shrek character. I call him Brexit Shrek. And for Brexit Shrek, I'm doing, it's just zero meshed because I couldn't be bothered. But even there is an issue with, for instance, you can't see it here, right? But for the mouth of Brexit Shrek, he can't open his mouth because it's just one mesh and there isn't really an inside. So you can actually see a bit of a line in the middle here. There's a speck line in the middle that is there because I was lazy, because I didn't want to do retopology for him. Also, the reason I didn't want to do retopology for him, because I just started as a silly little sketch. And I just kind of sculpted him without symmetry. And then I had to retopologize two sides, and I was not going to do that. How long have you been in the 3D business? Well, I started in 2009, so that's some time ago now. Yeah, if you auto-rig stuff in production, your riggers will absolutely come hunt you down, as they should as well. Then it's Hunger Games time. Yeah, don't auto-rig or don't auto-topologize, anything like that. It's don't do that. It's just not gonna work. It can work for certain things in certain situations, like anything. The whole, like, the more senior you get, the answer is always, yeah, it depends. But for topology, usually the answer is just, I mean, it is always, it depends if you do need to do it, but usually you're gonna be going towards, yeah, you probably just have to do it by hand. Also because if you do topology automatically, you're gonna find that a lot of areas they just require bespoke topology anyway. Like, you just have to fix a loop around the eyes, and then it's fine. I promise you, then it's fine afterwards. And then it's not fine afterwards. And then you have to fix the eye and the ears and all that. And then you might as well just do it by hand. Again, retopo really, really doesn't take particularly long if you know how to do it. So just suck it up, put on some good podcasts, some past Flip Normal streams. We have plenty of those. just do it, right? Just embrace the work. I met somebody recently who was really trying to avoid doing retopology. Were really asking me, how can I avoid the whole step altogether? And it's like, you can't, just embrace it. It's, even if you don't like it, it doesn't matter, completely irrelevant. It's just a step of the process. If you don't like to do retopology, I mean, got some bad news for you. It's just, it is just what it is. Do you merge all subtools before exporting to Maya for retopology? Nope, because that's really annoying, because then I have to unmerge them. So I tend to just export one at a time. You can do this very easily in C plugin over here, and you can do subtool master, and you can just export them here. So that's really handy. You can just export them out here, so you don't have to do it one by one. But yeah, I do recommend that you just export them all out. Also here I have the character has hair as well, but this is all just temporary. All the hair is just temporary, just so that we can just so I can see what it's supposed to look like. This would be an XGen job for sure. I'm going to refine the skin a little bit as well for the character. So I'm going to go over the whole thing, and then we're going to use the smooth brush. Is it better to... Is it better or worth it to be a generalist or a specialist when it comes to 3D? Honestly, that is one of those, the biggest ones. It depends. It really, really, really depends. It depends on... Okay, so what does it depend on? It depends on what you personally enjoy to do. Some people's brains don't work as a generalist or as a specialist. They only work as one of them. They either need to just switch tasks all the time, and then being a generalist is fantastic, or they work in a sense that you need to just focus on one thing for a very long time, and then being a specialist is the way to do it. But more than that, it also depends what industry you want to be in. If you want to be in visual effects, like, you know, high-end films, then it doesn't really matter if you want to be a generalist, because that train has unfortunately sailed like 20 years ago. Like most people in VFX today are specialists. So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to work in commercials, it's a bit of the opposite. Then it's a bit more of a generalist as well. So, but also if you want to do, even if commercials, you still would have specialists for rigging and animation, because that stuff is just really, really, really hard to do. So that stuff is often done by specialists. So yeah, it depends on so many different things. Which one is better paid? Well, it depends, right? Depends on you as a person. There are so many things here that varies. Yeah, what Lars is saying here, in games, the smaller the company, the more you need to be a generalist. It's the same thing in film and commercials as well. Because it's not like all film is Transformers. You have a lot of different levels of film. So for instance, if you're working in a small country like Norway, which is tiny for film, then you very, very much need to be a lot more generalist than if you are working in London, which is absolutely massive for film. So the bigger the project, the more specialized you become. The smaller the project, the smaller the company, the more generalist you become. It also makes sense as well. If you have a tiny commercial, most likely that's not going to involve really high-end characters, right? And why do you have specialists? Well, you have specialists because the high-end character work is really, really difficult. So it's not just like the sculpting of it, it's also like all the other stuff that needs to be done, like the high-end rigging, the face shapes, the texturing, the look dev, the CFX, all that kind of stuff. So you just kind of need that, but like mid-tier or like low-end commercials, they just don't have the budget for any of that. So yeah, it really just depends what you want to do. Here's a really good question by Liana. I struggle with the secondary details on sculpts, where to place the details and sculpt convincing wrinkles. Any advice on this? Yes. So let's see if I have Photoshop open here. I do not, but we can very easily fix that. So I'm going to take some screenshots of this and throw this into Photoshop. So a really good way to figure out the primary, secondary, and tertiary forms is to take your photos, take your reference, because you need reference. If you don't have reference, you're just in a lot of trouble, because then you're just sculpting blind. Like, you really genuinely need references for this kind of stuff, like basically for all levels. So if I use reference for topology, for UVs, for basically everything, right? Less so for topology and UVs, but I used to. And particularly for secondary shapes like mid-frequency. So let's see, we are in Photoshop now. Great, let's do a screenshot of this guy here. Cool. Maybe I actually have something for Brexit Shrek as well. Cool, here is also something we can use for this. So let's say this is your reference, right? Instead of just looking at this stuff here, there's just too much stuff here. If you're trying to look at this as reference, assuming this is a photo, right? It's like semi-photorealistic, so it kind of works. There's too much info. You have color variety here. See a scar here? This is color information. There's just so much information. You see you have spec here, you have spec here, you have transmission. You have so many things. And then when you were to remove all that, you still have all the different frequencies. So let's remove it. Let's start to analyze stuff. Let's genuinely just try to like remove different things here. We're going to try to change this so we can just have a shape. Even here, you can see just doing black and white, you can really see if you start to mess around with the different colors, you can see how much you can change it just by this. So I want to get to a level here where the it looks nice and neutral. Just now we've removed the color, right? But even here, you can see just by changing the yellows, you can drastically change this. So in large way, we've removed color and we've removed spec to some degree, which is great. So we just want to have a little bit like this. And then I want to make this a bit brighter, and then I want to just increase the overall brightness, maybe a bit contrast for it. Like this is great. Cool. So we've removed some stuff from this. Let's do a duplicate of this, and let's duplicate this a few times. Now let us remove the frequencies. What we can do, we can go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then we can just blur the crap out of this. The reason you kind of want to blur this a lot is because now, let's say we put it like here. Now, the only thing you can kind of see, let's put a bit more here. The only thing you can kind of see is like low and mid frequency. So throw this into your PureRef board and then just sculpt what you're seeing. Genuinely just sculpt exactly what you're seeing now. And then you can do the same thing here. You can throw this under Gaussian blur and you can do this the same thing here, but now you're blurring it less. And now you sculpt what you're seeing now, and still no high frequency, right? But we have less of it. And then we can go in here and we can like even blur this a bit more, like a bit less like so. Just still blur a little bit, just so we see it. And then you can do this. And now you're sculpting what you're seeing here. So every single time you add another one here, you can just sculpt what you're seeing. Another way to explain this is if we were to do a little high pass with this. Let's do a high pass like so. So this here is kind of your low frequency. Then we can do this. We can do another high pass here. Let's do high pass. Then we put this on top. Actually need to blur this more. Alright, cool. So this is basically your low frequency. Now this is kind of your mid frequency. And then if we were to take this one, do a high pass of this as well. And now we're kind of dealing with the like more high frequency. And if we were to put this on top now, you can start to see that this is starting to come together. So now if we were to remove each one of these, you see here, if we remove the mid frequency, see how soft it becomes. Like if we remove mid, we're really lacking the structure. If we remove high, we're really missing definition. If we remove the low, we are, well, this didn't work. If we remove the low, then yeah, we're just missing the overall structure for things. So I think this is really, really key to keep in mind. I'm just going to fill this in so we can see how this works. So here we have just high and mid, and you see really nice details, but we're really missing the underlying structure of things. So that for me, this is a decent way of looking at it. You need to first understand the frequencies, but you need to remove all the crap from it. Because see here, if we were to look at this one, right, like compared, just having a look at this one here, this would be our high frequency. Compared this to this, there's just so much stuff in it, right? So just focusing on that, I find to be massively beneficial. So yeah, it's about finding a good reference, but it's also genuinely about understanding the parts as well. But also just one of the things which is kind of sucky, but also kind of nice to know is that we as humans, we just genuinely suck at looking at reference. Like we genuinely don't really see a reference for what the reference is like. We see kind of reference kind of the way we are in a way. So you need to learn to analyze reference. It's so important to learn to analyze reference. And the way you analyze reference is you keep looking at reference a lot, but you start to look at the specific things that you want to get from this specific reference. Like if you, for instance, if you're doing, if you want to look at the color for this, you can't just look at this because this is, like you can't just look at this and try to find a color. You have to do something like, let's see where this one is, adjustments, and then we have to do something like shadow highlights. And if we do this enough, you can start to see that we are going to get more of a color for this, maybe. Let's see how this works. So if you're, let's see if you play with cards right, you can just see more what the true albedo looks like in terms of this. So this is really useful for grading photos as well. You can just get a better feeling for it. Not that this is perfect in any way, but it just shows you that you can analyze colors in a different way. So it's all about learning to analyze the reference and then practicing. Have you tried designing characters on the fly, not using concepts? Oh yeah, all the time. It's a lot of fun. It's I really enjoy doing that, but it's also really hard. So I often make my own concepts, but I always have reference for it. So deciding on the fly does not mean you don't use reference. What I tend to do is I tend to look for different kinds of references, and then I kind of like blend them in my head. So I might have like what I kind of enjoy doing is like making like old-timey criminals, because I think they're really funny. They look just really cool. So I might have a photo of like maybe a gorilla, and then I might have a photo of a old-timey jaywalker from the 30s, or somebody who was caught burglarizing a house from the 30s or something. And then I kind of just merge the gorilla with the burglar, and then you get a really cool orc-looking character, really cool like goblin-style thing, and you just kind of get something really interesting. So you can definitely make designs yourself like that. So I don't think you should be afraid of concepting yourself, but I would say though, if you are a student and you want to get a job, don't do original concept art unless you are actually qualified to do that, because my god, that is a different thing. Do it for fun, but it's just a whole different thing. It's kind of like if you're a mechanic and you enjoy tinkering with cars, you wouldn't design a car, right? Like it's just a whole different skill set. So just something to be aware of. You only really realize how different a skill set is once you try it yourself, and you get into trouble and you realize that, oh crap, I don't really know what I'm doing. Or once you see somebody who really knows what they're doing, when you let them cook, then really cool things happen. Because concept art is not just a case of making something look cool. It's also about making it functional. That's one of the main things with AI, right? Like AI can in a lot of cases make something look quite cool, but it's not functional in the slightest. And if you had to model based on AI concept, you would just have to throw a chair at the computer out of frustration, because it's just genuinely not functional. Like I mentioned yesterday on the stream, that something that really annoyed me was, for this character here, I was really struggling to find good references. Again, oldish movie. If somebody didn't know it's an oldish movie, I'm gonna feel like a grandpa now. It's just an older movie at this point, and it's hard to find good reference. A lot of the photos that were taken on set were probably taken with like analog photos, so it's hard to find really good reference for that kind of stuff. So, you know, phone cameras weren't really available, so there's just a lot less reference. One of the references I found was AI, and I didn't realize until I did a lineup and it didn't make sense. Even after I did a lineup, I was like, kind of works, but there's something off about it. It just didn't match the other photos. So, yeah, it needs to be functional. I'm a hobbyist who sculpts static characters such as minis. I used to think manual retopo wasn't important for me, but I've had issues with topo when texturing plus rendering. Should I learn the basics? Yeah, absolutely. Like you're never going to regret actually learning the things you need to do. It's one of those. It's tempting to kind of skip certain parts, but it's gonna come back with dividends if you actually know what you're doing. If you understand why retopology is important and why good topology is important, then it's really going to speed up your work. And like, it's not just going to speed up your work, it's going to reduce the amount of time it takes to troubleshoot things. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, that good topology is not just a case of that, like it's done instantly, right? It's the case that you have to go through and fix things. It reduces troubleshooting later on, and reduces that you mess things up. It just means that you have a reliable pipeline. Now, this is something I still want to make a video on. I promised this one before, but the gist of it is that good topology is not universal. What on earth does good topology mean? Well, for my Brexit Trek, good topology was kind of zero meshing. Nobody else is going to see the wires. It's fine. So that's enough, right? It's good enough for me. But in a production, it's not good enough. Why it's not good enough? Well, it's not going to deform correctly. It might be too heavy. It's going to just be weird. So it just depends. If you are making a VR game, you need very different topology than AAA game. If you were to make a VR game from of The Last of Us, the best model in the world from The Last of Us is going to be a terrible VR model because it can't run at the frame rate, and at the same time the best VR model in the world is going to be terrible for a AAA game because it's too optimized. You're sacrificing too much quality for that. It's the same thing you see in this every time a AAA game like Hogwarts Legacy gets ported to the Switch. It looks terrible because the Switch is so low powered. It's basically like a mid-tier phone from like 7 years ago, right? So it just looks really bad. But the topology for that, for those games, it's good topology for what it needs to do. Essentially, good topology is topology that gets the job done. It's not visually pleasing topology. It's not like high tech or anything. It just depends entirely on what it's going to be used for. If you're building just miniatures for 3D printing, you don't need topology that deforms. It's never going to deform. But if you're doing stuff for an animated movie where the character is compressing and stretching all the time, my god, you need to spend a lot of time on topology. And that topology that you're getting there is not going to necessarily be intuitive, meaning that you can't necessarily look at that topo and be like, yeah, this is good topology or not, because you need feedback from rigging. You genuinely don't know what good topology is until you've taken it through production and like actually played with it. It's like tested it out. Follow-up. Maya is probably overkill. You think learning Retopo and Blender is sufficient? I mean, yeah, it's if it works, it works. You also have another tool called Topogun, which is fantastic. So Topogun is also quite an affordable tool. You definitely, like, Maya is definitely overkill just for Retopo. Meaning if you're a hobbyist, and honestly for most hobbyists, Maya is way too overkill. It's not even overkill in terms of like the software, it's overkill in because you have to pay for it, right? You do have Maya Indie, it's like $200 a year. It's not available everywhere, but it's still like $200 a year. Like it's money you can spend on other things. So yeah, Blender is great for that. Blender is also perfectly good for retopology. You have some good add-ons for it. I still think Maya is better because it, just out of the box, it comes with really good tools. But yeah, Blender is great as well for retopo. I do a lot of my retopology in Blender. Oftentimes I do it because of pure laziness, because opening Maya takes like 45 seconds or something. Opening Blender takes 3. Sometimes that's just what I end up doing. It's not logical. It's just a case that, well, it kind of starts faster. So this is a tool of today. But retopology in Blender does have a bit more setup. In Maya, you just click on the reference mesh, the high poly one, hit make live, which is just a button, and then you just start retopology. In Blender, it's definitely a bit more of a setup. You probably need a tutorial for this. You have to set up some modifiers and such, but it's fine. It's free. Yeah, there's a comment here. I feel like if you're character artist, you kind of need to learn rigging and skinning to some extent because it will make topology much better. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good idea to at least understand the basics of it, so at least you kind of know what skinning is, so that you speak the same language as the rigger. You will never really skin things yourself, but I think it's very useful. It's the same as if you're a modeler and you're never going to texture, just learn some basics, the basics of texturing, because it's going to make it so much easier. Like, let's say you're a modeler who you do your own UVs, so that depends, right? Some studios will have the texture artists to do UVs, some will have modelers do it. If it's a modeling and texturing task, that's really a question of a definition. But regardless, even let's say you need to do the UVs and you don't know how to texture, just learn the basics of texturing. It's just going to help everyone. I would not accept UVs. If I was texture artist, I would not accept UVs from somebody who didn't know how to texture. It's just not gonna make sense. I would let them do all the unfolding and such, but I would have to lay them out myself afterwards, because it would just be a mess. It would just be arbitrary. While if you understand what's going on, you can make some generally practical UVs. It's the same with this when it comes to a good topology. Good UVs aren't really aesthetically pleasing UVs. Good UVs are UVs that get the job done. So if you have so often the UVs that you end up with, they don't really look particularly good, but they get the job done. Or the UVs that look good, they might not be very optimized. I always think about it as you can either optimize for like texturing, right, which starts with UVs. So you can either optimize for a computer or you can optimize for a human, and one is not better than the other. It depends on the use case. If you're from a film, you often want to, you don't really care too much about performance. You care very much about the final output, and then you care very much about how easy and effective it is to work with the asset, how easy it is to texture it and to look at it and all that. But if you're for games, it kind of doesn't really matter how easy it is to texture. It just has to run at 60 FPS. So then you have to sacrifice a lot of human intuition for that, or basically nice human UX, so that it's easy to work with, because you just have to optimize it. So if you have to make some pretty bootleg masks and when texturing and such, well, that's just what you have to do. Like for instance, right, if you want to make an optimized character, you just UV map half the character and it's fully symmetrical. But the problem with that is that you can't really make unique variations without some hacks. But you do save literally half the texturing space. So that means you need half the texture maps, which means half the data. And if you have a lot of characters, that stuff adds up real fast. But for films, doesn't matter. Like if you were to optimize this and you show it to a supervisor and you're like, hey, I optimized it now. They're like, cool, can I have unique textures on the other side? And you're like, nope. And they throw a chair at you because, you need to have unique textures on either side. Sometimes it's overwhelming, the comment here by Liana. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but having the skills, you need to be a decent character artist. You need to know modeling, sculpting, topo, UVs, texturing, rendering, lighting, maybe grooming. Yeah, not just that, you have to know like 5 different software as well, and you need to stay up to date on these packages. Yep, that's how it is. It is real fatigue in this. That was almost like easier years ago because we didn't have texturing software. It was just like Photoshop, and you just kind of threw human misery at it. Of course, it looked terrible at the end, but comparatively, right? But it was just less stuff to learn. But yeah, it's hard getting into the industry as a junior character artist is really difficult. What I would say though is the most important thing if you want to to get in as a character artist, I really think the most important thing is sculpting. It's not even like because I'm a sculptor, right? Because I'm not really a sculptor. I'm a 3D artist. I've done tons of texturing production as well. The reason I say sculpting is because if you're doing your own characters, everything is informed by the sculpting. If you try to really focus on texturing for, let's say, it's more of a generalist character position, and your sculpting is crap, it doesn't matter. Like this character is going to look just kind of bad. And also topology is kind of an easy thing to learn comparatively to the rest, right? Topology and UVs really isn't that hard. You can teach somebody that in kind of a few days or a few hours. But sculpting takes literally years to learn, which is why it's so important. If you're in a production, let's say you want to start as use your career somewhere, and the supervisors, the people interviewing you are like, yeah, your UVs are a little bit, they could be a lot better. Your topology could be a bit better. They're like, but I can teach you this in like 3 hours. That's fine. But if your sculpting is a bit crappy, they're like, yeah, come back in 3 years when your sculpting is better, because they cannot teach you good sculpting. It's just not really a thing. Learning sculpting is like learning a language. So it's just not comparable to the other skills. It's like sculpting is like equivalent to animation in a sense that it's a whole different discipline. To put it like this, it would be very, very difficult to become a character artist anywhere without being at a high level at sculpting. Not saying it hasn't happened, it's just a lot harder. Yeah, it's one of those tricky things about sculpting or about 3D today. You just need to know a lot of tools, and you just need also on top of this as well. It's not just that you need to know the technicals of it, right? Like in terms of like, oh, you need to export out your character and you need to be able to, set up a displacement map, a normal map, and know all that kind of stuff. It's also that you need to be good at it as well. Like if you need to texture, it's not just enough to know Painter. You need to generally know so many fundamentals. Like the amount of random crap CG artists know is insane. Because you just tend to work on tons of different weird projects, and the amount of like weird trivia you do is crazy. Like I worked in Pirates of the Caribbean years ago now, and I just made sharks for like 6 months. The amount of stuff you pick up about sharks is just it's interesting, right? So suddenly you have somebody who walks around with just knowing random stuff about sharks. Would you suggest speed sculpts to improve sculpting skills or more pipeline portfolio pieces? All right, let's talk about this one. So there are 2 things you need to become basically to become employed if you need to, if that's your goal, right? Assuming it's a portfolio you're talking about. The first thing is you need to get good. This is just how it is. There's just no way. You need to just get good at what you're doing. So before you build a portfolio or anything like that, you need to develop your skills straight up. It means that if you are working on a game and you want to be a character artist, you need to be able to make a character for a game, right? If you can't do that, then you're not getting hired to make that. Kind of makes sense, right? So first, you need to develop the skills to do that. And then once you have gotten good, then you need to show that you have got good. So this is basically portfolio. So the first step is show that you're good, develop your skills, and then show that you got it. This is in a portfolio. So in a portfolio, this is where you need to show this off. So this means that if you aren't good, you need to get good. If you are good, you need to show that you're good. That's kind of a simplified version of looking at it, but it's also kind of true. It means that, let's say that I'm at a certain level of sculpting, and I'm at a level where I know that, let's say like all my computers were destroyed and my entire portfolio was destroyed, and I had to rebuild my entire portfolio, right? At this point, I would be like, then I was looking for a job. I would be like, okay, cool. I have the skills to make characters for movies. Cool. So I have that sorted, but nobody knows that I can do it yet. So now I need to show that I can do it. And then that means I need to show characters like this. I need to develop characters that shows that. But if you can't do that, you have to develop those skills. If you're trying to rush into making a portfolio without the underlying skills, you're just going to get your ass handed to you. You're just going to get slapped. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's completely irrelevant if you spend 2 years building a portfolio. If you generally don't have the skills to pull it off, you're wasting your time. So should you do speed sculpts? Should you do portfolios? Well, speed sculpts are a way to develop your skills. So speed sculpts is basically a way to, a few things, right? You learn from that. First, you probably get a bit faster because you do focus on speed. Second off, you get to combine all the skills, because let's say you're sculpting a human, you need to get to a final result real fast, because you can't necessarily construct all the anatomy and all that. You kind of have to wing it, and by winging it, you kind of internalize a lot of the anatomy. But if you don't know your anatomy and you do a speed sculpt, well, then you're wasting your time, because you can never get there. You can't guess the anatomy. So what I would say, so how do you get good, is you need to do a few different things. You need to study your anatomy, straight up study. You need to just do this. If you don't know your anatomy, if you don't know the bicep brachia and your deltoid and all that, it doesn't really matter. And then you need to practice a lot. And then you need to keep redoing this. So you need to just keep going through all these things. One of the ways I think about basically developing skills is with 3 main points. The first one is you need quality instruction. If you don't have quality instruction, it doesn't matter. It's like if you're trying to learn Japanese, but your source material is in poor Japanese or is in Korean, then you have poor instruction. It does not matter how much you practice. Number 2 is you need to practice. You need to just drill stuff over practice. You need to just drill stuff over and over and over again, because it's the whole like 10,000 hours, right? It's not true because it's not 10,000 hours, that's just a random number, but you kind of need an insane amount of time. But if you practice wrong, then you're just gonna get screwed up, because then you're just doing the wrong thing. Again, it's the whole thing. You don't have quality instructions and you practice that, well, you're just gonna do the wrong thing. So the third one is you need feedback, high quality feedback. If you don't have high quality feedback, man, that's difficult. How do you get high quality feedback? Well, there are mentorships. I have my own mentorship for that. You can join something like the Flip Normals Discord, which is great for, I can see some people in the chat here from the Discord, so you can join that for feedback. Or you can find other mentorships as well, or you can learn to feedback stuff yourself. A good way to feedback stuff yourself is to try to, like if you're practicing, you can get a scan, and then you sculpt based on the scan, and then so this is like your version, and then you find basically the difference between this. So you look at the scan, you look at your sculpt, and you just find a difference. You can do a project back and forth and such, and you can kind of learn to self-feedback that. Of course, I'm self-feedback when it comes to this character as well, but often is really, really beneficial to go through and get feedback from somebody else. This is kind of it. And then there is an elusive fourth one here, which is to teach. Teaching cements all of this kind of stuff. So this is kind of how I like to think about basically developing the skills. And so this is in the first section, right? This is the whole get good. And the second section is build portfolios. How you build a portfolio is so unique to each person, what you want to do, but without the underlying skills, you genuinely have nothing. Like you genuinely have no chance. Then it doesn't matter. You're trying to compete in the Olympics 100-meter dash and you're slow, right? It's completely irrelevant. It's not about like which shoes should you buy for the Olympics or something. Well, you're too slow. You need to just get to a level. So that is so important. Develop the underlying skills, and then you can start to think about a portfolio piece. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't try to develop like portfolio pieces before, in the sense that you should do projects, right? Keep doing projects constantly. But there is a difference between doing projects to essentially develop your skills versus you're building a full-on portfolio right now. But yeah, doing projects is also very, very, very good practice. But there's no one way to do this. Every single person I've asked who works in visual effects or games or anything like that, everyone has their own weird stories, because everyone, like, it's not a standard thing. Nobody just kind of, some people do, but very few people just kind of end up in VFX or games, because you kind of can end up as a business stuff. You know, your family want you to study business, and now you study business, and afterwards you end up in a bank, right? Whatever. But you don't really just happen to fall into game dev or high-end movies or something like that. Everyone have their own stories. So the way I did it worked for me at the time, may not work for other people at this time, because it's like if somebody graduated in the 90s, right, and they're using that experience on how to get a job today, it's not going to work. Yeah, so here's a question. This is just a Dynamesh mesh. There's nothing fancy here. Just Dynamesh. All of this is just Dynamesh. So yeah, just keeping this stuff simple, because I haven't nailed down the design yet. I'm still figuring out the design, and if I'm figuring out the design, I'm not going to bother with zero meshing anything, because if I have to, like, this is very rough still. I'm still just figuring out the core proportions and such with this one, and I'm going to be adding tons of new things to this character. Hey, I'm a concept artist at Vancouver Film School trying to migrate to becoming a 3D artist for games. Do you have any advice for me? That's a tricky one. What kind of 3D artist do you want to do? Because that depends, what you do depends very, very much on what you want to do. If it's indie games, if it's AAA, if it's character environment. First off, I would just recommend in general, like, probably download Blender, to be honest, and then just start to play with things. Try to try to set projects. Let's say you want to, this in the beginning doesn't matter too much of his character or his environment, you just want to learn 3D. The best advice I kind of have like that is get Blender and then try to just kind of immediately start to look at your desk and try to make some of them. And then you're going to immediately run into issues, and then you need to look up tutorials, and then every time you look up a tutorial, you learn something new, and then you try to model something new, and you just learn that way. There's no one way to learn 3D. There are so many ways of doing it. Some people need to be told very specifically what to do. They need almost like classes for it, or not almost. Some people need straight up classes. Some people, they can just kind of pick up software like it's ice cream. So it just depends on what you prefer to do. But really trying to model stuff that's on your desk, I think, is a very good exercise. It sounds like a very simple one, but it means that you get exposed to a lot of different things. Like the simplest one there is probably going to be a pen or something like that. Like if you have a Wacom tablet or something, try to just model that. Or if you have a glass or something, like household objects are kind of nice. Try to avoid plastic stuff, because pen can be plastic, right? But the problem with plastic stuff, modeling that, is that they are often made in like specific molds. And that is really, really tricky to model. But yeah, modeling a pen, a glass, or maybe your phone or something. Simple stuff. So now I'm just evaluating the design, because this stuff can be a bit tricky, so you get blind really fast. So it's really important to really just look at it once in a while, big picture. And also, reminder, we have a very nice summer sale going on. So make sure to check out flipmomos.com for tons of sales. We have, like, I know a lot of people here are interested in learning 3D, obviously. So we have tons of really, really cool products here. We also have really nice reference packs. I can't really show these because I might get banned from YouTube, but we have really, really nice reference packs here by like Graphit, for instance. So if you want to check this out, these are, good thing it doesn't load because these are quite not safe for work. Some of these, they're not like naughty or anything. It's just like reference packs of nude people. So that stuff can be great. Here's one that's really good. This is one of the best selling products recently, actually, which is on sale. It's how to do stylized painting. This is really cool. Like, it's genuinely just like really high quality stylized painting. So I'll send a link to this one here. So let's see if this loads. The site is under a lot of traffic because we have a lot of visitors at the moment. Here's also one. This is fantastic Speechar. Nikolai Nadenhov. He is, somebody just recommended him right in the chat now, actually. He is brilliant. So definitely check out anything by the Speechar / Nikolai Nadenhov. Brilliant guy. And of course, check out your bros. Oops, here is a little naughty one. This one doesn't have a mature tag. I'm gonna have to fix that. So yeah, just something to be aware of. Just don't wanna get banned from the YouTubes. But yeah, reference packs are phenomenal. That's one of the best additions to the 3D artist workflow in recent years, just because it's it used to be that you had to go to live drawings classes to do it, and of course you couldn't take photos of the live model because that would be a massive violation of privacy. But with reference packs, you can genuinely just get really high quality reference, which you can use for your own projects. So if you check out one of the most recent links here, this is to like the Flipmomos creators. This is where we have tons of cool stuff like I've made a lot of the tutorials myself, so we have a like intro to sculpting, which is really good. Well, I think it's really good. I am a little biased, but it seems like it's well reviewed, well received. So intro to sculpting is really good because it allows you to just learn sculpting, really. It's a fairly unique course I hadn't seen other people do. So that's really nice. In addition to that, you have intro to anatomy, which I highly recommend if you want to learn anatomy. It's all done. Those of course is all done by me, so it's kind of in the same style as some of these streams, just obviously a lot more refined. Not just me kind of sculpting and talking, but structured stuff. All the courses are essentially stuff that I wish I knew myself. So by Matt S is saying, intro to sculpting is excellent. Thank you very much. It's the target audience is basically me, but years ago. So it's stuff I wish people had taught me when I learned is learning sculpting, or even like if it's Mari, right? It's like we just came out with Intro to Mari some months ago. It's still like stuff I wish I knew about Mari. So we're all trying to keep them very practical, and the thing we do with our tutorials is that I'm really trying to not just be documentation, because you're going to read the documentation. I'm trying to curate it in a very real way, where if you're watching a tutorial, you know that what's being shown in the tutorial is useful stuff, because I've kind of removed a lot of the crap from the software, in the sense that there's always so many weird things. So we kind of explain the weird things in a simple way, like how do you save in ZBrush? Don't use document save as, and just trying to curate it, basically pre-digest it. Yeah, if you want to do like AAA characters, then I recommend like to learn the technicals. If you, depending on how you are as a concept artist, right? Like some people are really good at like shape and sculpting, all that. But if you need to start, if you're struggling with technicals, don't build a whole character, because that stuff is really difficult. Meaning that if you can't do a simple project, like just a simple head, then you can't do a full character. So start with something simple. Start with maybe just a head, maybe just a face or something, and try to take it all the way through. It doesn't matter necessarily if it looks good or not. It's like a technical exercise. It's almost like you're just trying to get the data to carry across. So let's say you're working with, you want to do it for Unreal, figure out like do a face, sculpt it up, figure out how to retopologize it, how to do the UVs for it, how to bake the maps, how to export out everything and import it back into Unreal, how to set it up there and such, just so that you kind of like just get a bit warmer for the overall workflow. You get a bit more familiar when it comes to just the overall workflow. And then once you're familiar with that, then you start to increase the complexity of it, because you need really like a lot of skills to do characters, right? You need, of course, the fundamental sculpting part, the fundamental character part, making it look good. But on top of that, you just need the technicals, right? You just need to be able to interact with a pipeline and a workflow like that. But alright, I am absolutely boiling today because we have a heat wave and it's about 30 degrees in my apartment and I have a fan on me. So I will be taking a few more questions, maybe one more question, and then I will be leaving for today. I'm probably going to be doing more stuff tomorrow, but for now, you know, heat wave time, so can't really do too much about that. Last week was fine here, and then suddenly, the moment our summer still starts, 30 degrees time. Should probably save this as well, I reckon. Yeah, you can see here, right? The hands are just thrown on top because I'm still figuring out the design. I might just keep them like this for some time, just because it's, then I don't have to dynamesh, I don't have actual nice topology to work with. But alright, if there aren't any further questions, then I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much for your great questions. We've been going for about an hour and a half now. If somebody is interested, like joined late, this stream here and yesterday's stream, they are going to both be up on the channel basically the moment the stream is over. So you can just go back and watch the whole thing, or you can you can just watch yesterday's or today's stream. And we also have tons of other streams as well from the other sales we've done. So yeah, just check that out. Tons of good content there. And just be sure to check out the summer sale on flipmoments.com. And with that, I will bid you adieu and see you guys another time.